Hi and welcome to another very exciting Swift tutorial. Today's video is all about iCloud and CoreData. We're going to create a iCloud-driven notebook application that will allow you to sync notes and notebooks through all your devices, and we're going to use CoreData to save all the stuff, and you're going to learn how to create an advanced CoreData data model which uses one-to-many relationships and some other very cool stuff like integrating iCloud to all of your CoreData applications. But before we get started, I'd like to thank you for over 9,000 subscriptions to this channel. This is really amazing, and I want to thank you by giving you access to this UDEMY course that I created some days ago for free. This is a UDEMY course about creating an iOS chat application completely from scratch, and I hope you're going to like it. So there are 50 promo codes in the video description below. There is this promo link from UDEMY. You can click on it, and there are going to be 50 promo codes that will allow you to get this course for free, and another 150 that will give you a discount of 70%, so that you're only going to pay about 20 euros or $20 or so. So please check out these links below, and I hope you enjoy this course, and here is a little trailer. Welcome to this community course about creating an awesome instant messaging app, which we are going to call Community Chat. This course is all about you. That means that once you've finished all the material that is currently available, you don't have to stop. Share your ideas on how to enhance the Community Chat app even further in the course discussion board. The course community is going to vote for new features that should be implemented. For the most popular feature requests, I'm going to release new videos every month. So what have we got so far? After identifying the basic challenges when creating a chat application, we're going to create an intuitive user interface. And since the app is about the people that are using it, we will also create an easy way for login and sign up to the Community Chat service. That also means that we need a way to find people that we can talk to, so a search feature should not be missing. The core of our app is of course the chat itself. So after discussing the most efficient ways to load and send messages, we will take our time and implement an iMessage-like chat experience. And for the communication to be instant and to give you a real-time feeling, you will learn everything you need to know to set up your project to receive and send remote push notifications. And as a little bonus, we will even add a custom notification sound. So this is our starting point from which we will evolve this course. So let's work together and make this the best messaging app out there. So now let's see what we're going to do in this tutorial. As you can see, this is an empty version of the Cloud Note application that we are going to create, and what you can see here is actually the notebook overview. So once I press the plus button here, I can add a notebook, let's say tutorial, and let's save this notebook. And since this is a iCloud ready application, I'm going to show you how another notebook that I'm going to create on another device is going to be created automatically. But let's first add some notes to this notebook. So I press on the notebook, and I get another overview, and I can now press again the plus button. And as you can see, we can insert a title here directly in the navigation bar. So this is, let's say, Note 1. And let's add some content here. The fact that you can get, and so on. And let's save this now, and let's close that down. And as you can see, there is this Note 1, and let's add another note here. So let's say I'll call this Note 2, and let's add some text. I'm so excited, and save. All right, now I'm going to close this one, and as you can see, we have two notes here at the moment. So now I will grab my other device. So as you can see, this is also working universal with rotation, and let's hope this works. All right, so now this is this, and now I'm going to grab my other device, and add another notebook. Let's call it test book. I'm going to save that one. And I'm also going to open the tutorial notebook and add note 3 and insert some text there, as long as we wait for the second notebook to appear. So let's say note 3 and add some letters here. Let's save that. And actually it already appeared, but the QuickTime did not update it. But as you can see here, the second notebook, test book, that I created automatically appeared. And now let's also open tutorial. And as you can see here, there is a note 4, which should actually be note 3, but I did not press the correct button. So let me just show you again that this works quite nicely. Well, now, come on. All right, so let's add, I will just type ABC. ABC, save this one, and maybe add some text, save it again. All right, and close that down. And now let's just wait. And there's ABC, as you can see, and there is the text. Here's the text I added for note 4, and now let's give it some time for ABC, and as you can see, there's also the text for ABC. Now, this was quite a complicated demonstration, but now we are finally ready to see how this is going to be created. So first of all, there needs to be some setup procedures in the Developer Center. So log in to your developer account at Apple and choose the iOS Dev Center. As soon as you're there, what you want to do is head for this iOS apps section and create an app identifier for your application. So you just click this plus button, give this identifier a name and a bundle ID that needs to be the same one as we will enter in Xcode. So make sure that this is going to be the same bundle ID you enter. And the most important part now is that you won't see these enabled flags here under iCloud once you've created this app bundle. What you need to do is go to the edit section. So just press edit down here. And then you can see this, these iOS App ID settings for the iCloud Note app, or we are going to call it Cloud Note in this tutorial. And what you want to do here is select iCloud. Include CloudKit support, which requires Xcode 6, and also maybe click on Edit and choose the container, the iCloud container that needs to be created for your app by Xcode. If it's not there already, then create an Xcode project and give this the same bundle identifier as you did with the app ID in the Developer Center, and then click on the Capabilities tab in the project settings and activate iCloud. And make also sure that you click on the iCloud documents, and then you should be able to see when you have selected use default container, here a default container selected, and this is going to be the container that should appear here. And actually it should also be automatically created when you check this box here. So actually, once you have created the app ID, go into Xcode, activate the iCloud under capabilities, and check this iCloud documents checkbox, and then you should see this when you go back to your app identifiers, and iCloud should be enabled. And this is actually a complete setup that you need to perform, and I have already done this with my Cloud Node project here, so I'm going to open that up. And as you can see here in your project, once you have activated iCloud under the capabilities, Xcode automatically creates this entitlements file, which enables the iCloud integration into your application. As you also can see here in my project navigator, you can see that there's already a data model for CoreData, which is automatically created because once I have created my new application, I have checked this Use CoreData checkbox, and this creates automatically the data model and also creates a CoreData stack in the app delegate Swift class. As you can see here, this is already CoreData stack, which we will going to adjust. But before we are going to do that, we are creating our own CoreData helper, which will help us with some stuff so that we have a little less code to write. So what we want to do is creating a class which can be a subclass of NSObject, and we are going to call this CoreData helper. Hit next and create. And this CoreData helper first needs to import CoreData as a framework. So let's do that, import CoreData. So that we can use the CoreData classes. And what we want to do actually is create two class methods, or two class methods, one to insert a managed object to CoreData and one to fetch entities from CoreData. If you're not familiar with these, with the basics of CoreData, I suggest having a look at some of my older tutorials where I'm going to cover all the basics of CoreData and how it works and what all this stuff means. So now we're going to focus on those two class methods. So let's write class function, and we will begin with insert managed object. And a managed object is actually an object that handles the entities of our CoreData data model, which we are going to create in a minute once we've completed this class. So let's add a class name here, which is going to be an NS string, and also a managed object context. So let's say managed object context, which is going to be of the type NS managed object context. And what we want to return is any object. All right. So this is our first function, and this actually does the standard procedure of inserting a managed object, but we are going to save some time implementing this once and then simply using this class to insert an object of class and so on. So let's create a managed object. And we're going to need the NS entity description and say insert new object for entity for name. And this is actually our class name in managed object context, managed object context. All right. And this is going to be an NS managed object. So we're going to cast that. And the only thing left to do now is returning this managed object context. So that is that. And the second function is going to be a little more complicated. It's going to be also a class function, so that we don't need to create an object of this class. We simply define these as class methods. So this is going to be fetch entities, again with a class name, which is an NS string, and a managed object context. NS managed object context, and also we will supply this this method with the ability to use a predicate. So let's also add predicate, which is a NS predicate, which is actually optional. All right, and what we want to return is, let's say, an NS array. All right. So now let's create a fetch request, which is going to be an NS fetch request. Simply initialize this, and now we need again an entity description, which is an NS entity description, but we don't need to specify this here. So NS entity description, entity for name. Again, we use the class name and the managed object context. And now we need our fetch request and specify the entity using our entity description. And now we will say if the predicate is not equal to nil, we also want to supply our fetch request with a predicate, which is the predicate unwrapped. And now let's say fetch request returns object as false. This is what we want to disable so that we can access all the objects that we have fetched and don't get an error message, or we won't be able to access all the properties of an entity. So this is that, and now let's create an items array, which is going to be managed object context, execute fetch request. With the fetch request we just created, and we won't need an error here. So now let's just return the items we have already created. And now we get an error here since we have to unwrap this, and we can simply do this here or here, wherever you like. So this CoreData helper is going to help us in creating our app a little faster, since we have to insert managed objects sometimes, and also we have to fetch entities sometimes, and this just saves us some time. And now we will head for our data model and create our database structure. So we will click on the Cloud Node XC data model, and as you can see, we don't have any entities yet, so we will scroll down here a little and click on the Add Entity button, which brings us back here, and I've just created one too much, so let's delete that. And we will simply rename this entity and call this node. And now we have to add some attributes here. And one node will have a content, which is going to be a string. A node will also have a title, which is also going to be a string. And a node also needs a creation date, since we want to be able to sort the nodes in relation to its creation date. So let's select date here. And this is actually all the attributes we are going to need. So let's add another entity, which is going to be the notebook itself. So let's add notebook. And the notebook also needs some attributes. So let's go back here and add a notebook title, which is going to be a string, and also let's add a creation date. So this is also going to be a date object. All right, now that we have created both entities, what we also need to do is define the relationship between notebook and node. And the tricky thing about that is that we have to think about this in some database terms. So one notebook can actually have many nodes, which means that we have to define a one-to-many relationship. So once we click on the notebook entity, we can create a relationship by clicking on the plus button here, and this relationship is going to be called node, since it points to a node, and the destination is going to be node. We can't define an inverse yet, so we will go to the node entity and add another relationship, which is going to be notebook. And in this case, the notebook is the entity we want to point to, and the inverse is already created, which is node. And now, as you can see, also the inverse of notebook is already created here. So how can we make this to a one-to-many relationship? As you can see here, there is a simple one-to-one relationship now between those two entities. To change that, we will simply select this node relationship with the selected notebook and click on the show the data model inspector. And what we want to do here is actually simply change the type from to1 to too many. And that's it. And when we have a look at the editor here, and let's just move that around, you can see now that there is one notebook, and this two-headed arrow indicates that this is a one-to-many relationships with many notebooks, with many nodes and one notebook. All right, now that our data model is defined and we have finished setting up all the attributes and the relationships, we can now create the NS-managed classes that we're going to use to access the these entities from our code. So what we need to do is select both of these entities and then click on Editor and create NS Managed Object subclasses. This will bring up this dialog here, and we'll click Next and select both entities and click Next again. And I am actually always using the Objective-C language for these NS Managed object subclasses, since I had some trouble with the Swift classes, so this could be superstitious, but I will select the Objective-C classes and just hit create, and also I will create a bridging header and say yes. This is maybe really not needed, but we don't have any disadvantages using these Objective-C classes here, since we don't have to edit them in any way. The only thing we need to do is go into our bridging header and import note.h and also import notebook.h. and build our application, and actually that's it. And now we can simply use these two NS Managed Object subclasses in our app. And let's just clean up a little and select all of our data model stuff, right click that and select, right click it and select new group from selection, and let's call that data model. And now we are ready to head to the next part, where we will create our user interface. As you've already seen when I demonstrated the app that we're going to create, the user interface is actually quite simple. We're only using standard components, but you can, of course, when you create your own applications, enhance that as much as you want. But for our purposes to explore CoreData and the iCloud integration, it will be enough to use the standard components. And to begin, we will remove this standard view controller from our storyboard and click on the object library here in the top right, in the lower right corner, and select a table view controller, which we are going to use to embed it into a navigation controller. So once I selected this table view controller, I will click on Editor in the menu and say Embed in Navigation Controller. And as you can see, we have now our navigation controller here. And the first thing we want to do is actually add a bar button item. So let's type bar button and add this bar button item here at the top right corner of our navigation controller. And this is actually going to be the plus button, which we are going to use for adding notebooks. So let me just select that and make sure I selected it, opening the what's it called, the document outliner. And there is my item, and now I will click on the attributes inspector. And what I want to select is the identifier add, so that we get this little plus button here. And that's actually all I want to do for now. I want to add another view controller here. So let's scroll a little to the right and add another table view controller. Bring that to the right here. And we want to add a segue between the table view cell and this second navigation, this second table view controller. So let's say show, and as you can see here, we will get the navigation bar. And the last thing we want to do is adding a standard view controller to the right, and again we will add the segue to the table view cell, and also say show here, and also we have a navigation bar here at the top now. And the only thing that we want to add here is a text view. So let's type text view here and add this one to our view controller. And what we want to do is adding some constraints here. So we have to reduce that in size a little. So actually this, as you can see, we have a Y position of 64, which we have to subtract from 600. So let's just use Spotlight. 600 minus 64 is 530. 536. So this is what we want to type here, 536. Press enter, and let's keep that on 64. And now we'll add some constraints. Press Control on your keyboard and drag the line to the view, and now press Shift and let's say leading space, training space, top space, bottom space, and by adding these constraints, this text view will automatically resize itself according to the size of this view itself. All right, now what we also want to do is adding some identifiers for the cell, since we need to add them to get rid of these warnings. So this is going to be cell, and let's also add this identifier here, which also needs to be cell. And one thing is still missing, since we have deleted a standard view controller. Once we have started editing this storyboard, we need to set this as the initial view controller again. So let's click again on the attribute inspector, select this navigation controller, and check this is initial view controller checkbox, so that we get this arrow here. And this is actually all we need to do to create our user interface. And before we continue, for example, creating the associated view controller or table view controller classes, we will go into our app.delegate.swift file. And as you can see here, there is already the CoreData stack defined for us. And we will make changes to the persistent store coordinator. So let's first of all delete the application's documents directory variable, because we are going to do that ourselves. And so that means we will also delete this line here. And as you can see here, we are inside the persistent store coordinator, and this is actually where all the iCloud magic related to CoreData is going to happen, except from the notifications that we will listen to. So let's first of all create a documents directory constant, and let's use NS file manager, default manager, URL for directory, and what we want to use is the directory in domains, and this is going to be the NS search path directory, document directory in domains, NS search path domain mask dot user domain mask. We are going to use the last one in this array and cast that to an NS URL. So this is going to be our documents directory, and what we want to create now is the store URL for our persistent store, and this is going to be the documents directory URL by appending path component, and this is going to be CoreData.sqlite. So this is what we want to do. This is the file that we create for our CoreData database. And the next thing we want to do is beneath the failure reason, we want to create some store options. As you can see here, there are no options defined for this persistent store. And these store options that we are going to define are giving our app the iCloud ability. So let's create a dictionary for store options, and this is going to have one key. This is called NS persistent store ubiquitous container ubiquitous content yes, the content name key, and this is going to be, let's say, cloud node store. And we will use now the store URL instead of URL here, store URL, and as options we will give this the store options that we have just defined. And actually that's all there is to creating an iCloud enabled persistent store. The last thing we want to do is go into our managed object context. And as you can see here, the managed object context variable is initialized. And we want to do this with a concurrency type and tell it that we want this to be of concurrency type main Q, or let's just write that to get auto-completion, and as managed object context concurrency type. And what we want to use is the main Q concurrency type, so that everything related to our managed object context is going to happen on the main queue of our app. Well, and that's it actually. And now that we have completed this setup for our CoreData stack, which is now iCloud enabled thanks to this NS persistent store ubiquitous content name key, we can go back to our storyboard, or much more create an associated class for our notebook table view controller, which is going to be a Swift class, and we're going to call it a notebook table view controller. So let's say this is a subclass of UI table view controller, and create this class. And we're going to associate that with this first table view controller. So this is going to be the notebook table view controller. And since we have now created our CoreData stack in app delegate, what we need to do to get our managed object context and work with it, we have to define it here. So let's first of all import CoreData to our new table view controller class, and we need to create two properties here. The first is the managed object context, and this is going to be an NS managed object context. Let's initialize let's make this explicitly unwrapped. And also we are going to need an array in which we can store all the notebooks that we will receive from our database. So let's simply call that notebook array, and this is going to hold only notebook object notebook class objects. So from this notebook managed object subclass, so we can simply say notebook and initialize this array here. So in the viewDidLoad method, we are going to change the title in our navigation bar, because we have to wait for the iCloud to complete its setup, and this takes some time. And this is actually the time where you could where you have to disable your user interface and show a loading screen or whatever you like. So what we want to do here is say self.navigation item.title equals, let's say, waiting for iCloud. And also, since we have to disable the user interface, and all you can do at the moment is clicking or pressing the plus button, which is the right bar button item, we'll simply use the enabled property and set this to false, which grays it out and prevents the user from interacting with this button. And to create our managed object context, we will use the view will appear method. So let's also call super view will appear and give this the animated parameter. Because every time we want, we will return back to this view, to this notebook table view controller, we want to add some notifications which are necessary for listening to iCloud events, and also to create our managed object context. So since it's not certain that it will be initialized, we will check if it is we will check if it gives us a value. So let's see, managed, let's just call this context. It's going to be a UI application, shared application, delegate. And this is a simple way to access our app delegate, and we'll cast that to an app delegate and have to make some parentheses around that. And now we can simply access the managed object context. So this is actually optional, an optional value, and by this but with this if statement, we are actually checking if this is nil, and if it's not nil, if there is a managed object context, we will now assign this context to our managed object context object property that we have defined here. So let's say managed object context is equal to this unwrapped context here. So now that we have created this managed object context and we can use it, we have to define some observers for notifications that are coming from the from iCloud. So let's use the NS notification center and the default center and add an observer with name, selector, and so on. So the observer is self, our table view controller class, and the first selector, let's call this persistent store did change. And the name of this notification is going to be NS persistent store coordinator did change notification. And there is not going to be an object, so let's say nil here. And the next notification that we want to add is again NS notification center, default center, add observer, self. And this is going to be the persistent, persistent store will change. And here we need a parameter since we are giving this an object. And this is going to be NS persistent store coordinator will change notification. And the object we want to give this notification is going to be the persistent store of our managed object context. So let me just zoom out. So this is our MOC, our managed object context, and it's persistent store coordinator. And the last notification that we need to add is again NS notification center, default center, add observer self. And the selector is going to be receive iCloud changes, which will help us to implement the or to merge the things that are coming from different devices. And we will simply, and this is simply the NS persistent store did import ubiquitous content change notification. All right. And also here we are giving this an object, again, the persistent store coordinator, since we are going to use that in that case. And because we have added these notifications here in view will appear, we'll also have to remove these observers in view will disappear. So we will simply call again NS notification center, default center, and remove observer. And in this case, again, observer is self, and the first is NS persistent store coordinator did change, and the object is nil in that case. Let's just copy that. I'll bring that to the front, and here we are going to use the will change, and again the persistent store coordinator, and here we are going to copy that again and add the did import ubiquitous content and so on notification, and that's it. And with that we have removed all the observers that that we have added in the view will appear. So these three basic notifications that we're now listening to are going to help us to use iCloud within our CoreData driven application. And we will now implement those functions that we have defined as selectors here. The first one is the did change. So function did change. And what we want to do here is actually, let me just comment that here, is re-enable the user interface and fetch data. This is what we are going to do here. So what we can do is actually use the navigation item again and the title, and let's say here iCloud ready. So now we can re-enable our user interface. You could disable your loading screen or whatever you want to use in that case. And what we can also do is say navigation item right bar button item and enable it again. And also now we want to load our data here, which is going to be a function that we're going to write in a minute. And the next thing we want to do is the store will change selector, the implementation of that. So let's add another function, store will change. And since we give this the persistent store coordinator as an object to use it if we need it, so we will give this the parameter notification, which is an NS notification. and we can use its user info property to access the persistent store. And what we want to do here is we can say navigation item dot title, and just say here changes in progress. But actually, it is a very quick thing that happens here between persistent store will change and persistent store did change. So actually the user won't experience this changes in progress message that often, but it depends, of course, on the connectivity on the network connectivity and the speed of the internet connection at that moment. So we will simply implement it here, and we also have to disable the UI here. So again, you would have to show a loading screen or disable some things in your user interface or whatever. In our case, we will simply again use our right bar button item and enable or disable that in this case, setting it to false. And now we can actually use our managed object context to save our changes that occurred in the database when this notification is triggered. So what we can do here is calling our managed object context and using perform block, which asynchronously performs what we are going to do now. And we will first have a look if our managed object context has changes. And if that is the case, so if the user has added a notebook in that case, we want to save the changes to the iCloud. So we will first define an error variable. So this is going to be an NS error, which needs to be optional, and we can assign nil here. And we will now say self.managedObjectContext save and give this an error pointer. And if there did not occur an error, so if there occurred an error, if this is not equal to nil, we will simply print an error message. So this is going to be a save error, and we will add this error so that we can see what the problem actually is, and if everything went all right. So if the save procedure was successful, what we want to do now is drop any managed object references, and we're going to do that simply by resetting our managed object context, and this returns the receiver to its base state. So this is what we need to do when changes occur in our CoreData database. CoreData will message this to the iCloud, and as soon as the NS persistent store coordinator will change notification is called, we will perform this code block. And the last thing we need to do now in order for our iCloud support to work is going to implement the receive iCloud changes function here. So let's add that to our code. And again, we're going to need the notification, NS notification. And this is actually pretty simple. We again use our managed object context to perform a block asynchronously. And the only thing we need to do here is call our managed object context again and say merge changes from context did save notification. And this is the reason why we have given this this notification an object, which is the persistent store coordinator. And now we can simply add this notification as a parameter to the merge changes from context did save notification method. And here again we can reload our data or load data. This is going to be the function we will call. And that's it actually. And before we can see anything of that really happen, we need to, for example, add notebooks to our database, and we are going to do that by creating an action from this plus button. So let's bring up the assistant editor and simply control drag to our tail view controller class, and this is going to be an action, and we will call this add notebook. And here we are going to do some CoreData stuff. So let's go back to the add notebook function here. Let me zoom in a little. And we're going to use, as you have seen in the demonstration, we're going to use an alert view on alert controller for the user to enter its the new notebook title. So let's create an alert. Let's call it add notebook alert. And this is going to be a UI alert controller with a title, message, and preferred style. So the title is going to be new notebook. The message is going to be enter notebook title. And this is UI alert controller style alert. No, not UI alert action, UI alert controller style.alert. And now we have to add a text field and two actions. So let's use the add notebook alert, add text field with configuration, and we won't need any configuration here. So let's add nil and add notebook alert, add action, which is going to be UI alert action with a title, style, and handler. So the title is going to be save notebook. Style is UI alert action style default, and the handler will need an alert action, UI alert action as a parameter. And what we want to do here is actually getting the content of our text field and saving it as a notebook to our database. So first of all, what we need to do is creating a creating a text field. So this is a text field object, and we will now use the add notebook alert and its text fields property, which is an array, and we will simply use the last object since there is only one. You could also use the first object and cast it to UI text field. And now we will check if the text field and its text property is not equal to nothing. So if the user entered something, what we want to do is create a notebook object, so a managed object, and therefore we are going to use one of our helper classes, our CoreData helper class, and this is going to be a notebook. And now we can simply use the CoreData helper and say insert managed object with a class name and a managed object context. And the class name we're getting from and a string from class, and the class is of course the notebook class, and the managed object context is our MOC, self.moc, because we're within a closure, and cast that to a notebook. All right. And now that we have such a notebook object, we can add some of the properties that we have predefined in our entities as attributes. And this is of course the title that we want to use now from the input from the text field. So what we want to do is using the text field's text property, and this gives us this adds the title to the notebook itself. And we have also one attribute that is called creation date. So we will simply add the current date and time using the NSDate class to give this to us and insert it to this creation date attribute. And now we can actually just save our managed object context, and this also saves the changes to the iCloud. And to see the changes in the user interface, we would have to load our data again. So since we don't have this method yet, we will simply write this as a comment. And there is also a last action that we need to add to our notebook alert, which is the cancel button. So let's add another UI alert action, which simply holds the cancel title, and this is UI alert action style cancel, and we don't need a handler here. And now we will simply present view controller animated. This is going to be add notebook alert animated true, and we don't need a completion handler. And let's build that, and this build succeeded. Now we have called this load data method sometimes already, And it's time now for us to also implement this function here. So let's add a function and call it load data. Open some curly braces, give us some space here. And what we need to do actually is pretty simple. We will empty the notebook array using the notebook array and simply reinitialize it using an array of notebooks and initialize this one. And now we can use another of our helper classes to fetch all the data from the database. And to do that, we will again use the notebook array. And now again, let's call the CoreData helper and say fetch entities in manage object context with a predicate. So the class name is again ns string from class, and the class we are using is currently the notebook class, and the managed object context is the MOC, and we don't use a predicate for this fetch request, and we want to cast that to an array of notebooks. So let's simply write this in brackets. And now we can actually go ahead and reload our table view. So let's say self.table view.reload data. And since now data is available, we can scroll down to the table view data source and return 1 as number of sections. And we can remove that warning here. And also we can return the number of rows that we get. And this is simply our notebook array. And let's count the elements in it. And now we can also uncomment this cell for row at index path method of the table view controller. And we have to change the identifier to cell. And to configure the cell, we will simply say cell.textLabel.text equals our notebook array, index path row, and in this way we can access the correct notebook for each row, and now we can simply access the title, and that's all there is to display the title of our notebooks in our table view controller. So let's go ahead and give this a quick look using a real device, which is quite important since let's always allow that. Since testing iCloud stuff really requires a real device, because the simulator does not give you a real-time or a real-world experience for that. And now CloudNote is running on my iPod, and as you can see here, we get a message telling us using local store 1. And I can see waiting for iCloud on my display at the moment. And as you can see now, there is using local store 0, which means now the persistent store coordinator is created for the first time, and iCloud is ready, is displayed on the iPod. So this works, and I will now simply connect this with QuickTime. So give me just a second and I'll be back. So, and as you can see here in the QuickTime recording window, iCloud Ready is displayed in our navigation bar at the top. And once I press the plus button, you can see there is our alert view, and I can now enter a notebook. Let's call it NB1, and let's save the notebook. And as you can see, nothing happens because we have not called our load data method yet. So let's search for these comments. Here we are within a closure. So let's say self load data. That's the same thing here, self load data. And also here persistent store did change load data. And now just give me 1 second again until I bring up QuickTime. And now iCloud is ready. And what we can do now is taking our plus button and type NB, let's say NB2 or NB1 again, save this, and it crashes. So what can we do about that? As it seems that this error occurs when we add a notebook, let's add a little breakpoint somewhere here. And there could not be an error in creating the alert controller, since we can see it. and this whole stuff works. So the problem must be somewhere here within this alert action. So now let me just run this to see where the error actually appears and what we can do about it. So I run the application. I'm waiting for iCloud. I press, once iCloud is ready, I press on the plus button. I get the alert controller, say save notebook, and there we are. Here's our breakpoint. Now we can just step through all of the, or step over all the steps here. So there is no error here. Let's do that again and again and again and again and again and again. Okay, so what we have seen now actually is that the error occurred somewhere here in those lines, and I think it might have something to do with the inser, which should actually be insert managed object. So we go back to our CoreData helper, and what we can see here is that we can change this to insert here as well, and we want to return a managed object actually, and not a managed object context. So this should be the problem that we've just experienced. So let's return the context, let's remove the context here, and we will simply return a managed object. And now let's run this again using QuickTime. So here we are, run the app again. So there it is, we're waiting for iCloud, and the iCloud is ready. We press the plus button and enter NB1, save notebook, and there's our breakpoint, of course, so let's remove that and step through, and there it is. There is our notebook 1, so this works quite nicely. These two messages indicate that iCloud is also working properly, and also as well, of course, that we get the messages iCloud ready and waiting for iCloud. And now we can continue in adding more support for our user interface and creating notes and so on. And what should happen is that once we press on one of the cells, we want to come to this next table view controller, which displays an overview over all the notes that are placed within this notebook. So let's first of all give this segue an identifier, which we will call show notes. And now let's go back to our notebook table view controller and prepare for segue with identifier. So we'll scroll down completely to the bottom of our file and remove these comments here. And we want to give our new view controller that we have to create in a minute, we want to give this view controller its initial notebook to get all the information from this notebook about the notes that are stored within it. So we'll first check if the segue and its identifier is equal to show notes, which we have just defined. And if this is the case, we want to create our new view controller. So new view controller here, and maybe we should do that first. So let me zoom out and create a new view controller, which we will call note overview. And this is also going to be a table view controller. So let's say next and create. And now let's associate this overview table view controller with this storyboard representation. So notes overview table view controller. And since we have already created it, now let's also go into this class and add some stuff here. First of all, let's import CoreData at the top. And we also want to create a property, and we will call it selected notebook, which is going to be a notebook object. And now we can build this and actually use that here in our notebook table view controller for the prepare for segue with identifier method. And now we can remove that comment actually, and now let's create a notes overview view controller, and this is going to be the segue. Use our segue and its destination view controller, cast it to a note overview table view controller. And now let's say if we have an index for a selected cell, so we need to unwrap that and check if it is nil, or because the index path for selected row is an optional value. So let's say self.tableview index path for selected row, and if we have an index path for a selected row, we can tell our notes overview view controller that the selected notebook is this one. So let's use our notebook array and its index, the index of the selected cell, and index.row, of course, since this is an index path and we have to get the row. So now we have prepared for our segue, and once we press on the on a cell, we will be taken to the note overview table view controller, and now it's our job to load all the stuff again that we have put into this notebook, and also we need to think about the iCloud stuff again. So what we can do here is simply copy the complete view will appear and view will disappear methods and insert them into the node overview table view controller just beneath the view did load method. And with that done, we can actually simply use it the same way we used it in our other view controller. So as you can see, we also have to create a managed object context. Let's say managed object context, and as managed object context, we will define this as a property here. And we also need, just like with the notebooks, we need an array for the notes that are stored in this notebook. So let's create a note or notes array, and this is an array of note objects. So that is that. And well, now let's just configure the view.load method. So what we want to do here is add some specific buttons. So let's first of all say navigation item, and it's left bar button item. There we want to display an X to indicate that once you press that, you come back. So let's say UI bar button item, and this is going to be this one with bar button system item, target, and action. And this is UI bar button item style, and let's say bar button system item, and let's say stop. Target is self, and let's just say dismiss view controller here for this button. And also we are going to add another bar button item, which is going to be a plus, to add a node to this notebook. So this is going to be the right bar button item, UI bar button item, UI bar button system item add. Target again is self, and we will call this action add node. So this gives us, and we can simply test that for a second. So let me run the application, bring up QuickTime. And as you can see here, there's our notebook. Once we touch it, we will be brought to the next view controller, which is empty at the moment, but we have our X and our plus sign, and we will now continue adding the dismiss view controller function. So let's simply add that beneath the view will appear. So let's say dismiss VC. We don't have parameters here, so let's zoom in a little. And what we want to do is self navigation controller pop to root view controller animated true, and that's it, actually all we need to do. And let's also add the add node function already. Let's keep that empty, and also we want the load data function that we can that we will keep empty for the moment as well, but we will actually simply use the view will appear method here to load data again. And what we have forgotten to this point is adding those three methods that we have also implemented here, which is persistent store did change, will change, and receive iCloud changes. We could also put that in somewhere else and only write this once, but for the simplicity now, let's simply add that here again. So that we are able to see changes as well that are taking place within one single notebook. So now that we have made the basic setup, let's take care of the load data and add node function. And let's bring this to the bottom, actually, that makes a little more sense. Let's start with the add node function, which is actually quite simple. We will create a node object as we did with the notebook, and use our Swift CoreData helper, or CoreData helper again, CoreData helper, and use insert managed object, and again string from class is the way to get the name for our class, and that's going to be node. And the managed object context we want to put it in is our MOC, and let's cast that to a node. And now we can give that one initial attribute, or insert some data into this attribute creation date, which is again the current date and time. And now we can simply add this notebook, this node to one of our notebooks, and this is quite simple. Since we have defined a one-to-many relationship in our data model, we can use our selected notebook and add a node object. And that's it. And now we will simply add our newly created node object to this notebook. And all that's left now is saving the managed object context. We could enter an error here to handle any errors that could occur, but let's leave that out for the moment. And what we want to do now actually is perform a segue in order to show this new node. But before we do that, let's also take care of the load data function, which is a little more extensive than the load data function of the notebook, since this time I want to show you how to sort data that you receive from a CoreData database. So again, we will empty our nodes array first each time we load data. So this is a array of nodes. So let's initialize that. And now, first of all, let's create a variable for the unsorted nodes. And this is going to be an NSMutable array. And now what we need to do is iterate through the notebook that we have selected in the last view controller and add each node to this unsorted nodes array. And we will do that with a for loop, and let's call this one single node for each single node in our notebook, our selected notebook. And now we can access the NS set that stores all of the notebooks, all of the nodes in our selected notebook by simply saying node. And now we will have to create a how do we call it? A loop node, in order to cast this one to a node object. And now we can use our NSMutable array and say unsorted nodes add object loop node. And now to sort this array and sort it by creation date, we need a so-called sort descriptor. So let's create that. Sort descriptor, NS sort descriptor. And we want to initialize this with a key. And this key is going to be creation date, and it's supposed to be ascending. And now what we can do is use our nodes array and use the unsorted nodes NSMutable array and say sort array using descriptor. And now this requires an array of descriptors, and we only have one, so let's put some brackets here, and this is going to be our sort descriptor, and we have to cast that to an array of nodes. So that's it. That's all there is to actually sorting stuff that is coming from our CoreData database, and this is actually one of the most important things when you're working with one-to-many relationships, that you access the nodes, in our case, within the notebook using the NSSet property that is defined in the NSManaged object class of our notebooks. So all we need to do now in the load data function is reload our table view. So let's say self.tableview reload data. And as I've told you, we have to think about what happens when we add a node, and also we have to think about what happens when you tap on one of the already created nodes. So let's again go to the bottom of our view controller class and uncomment this prepare for segue with identifier. And since we don't have the setup completed for our last view controller, let's do that and create a new class, which is going to be we call it node view controller, and this is going to be a subclass of UI view controller, and create this one. And now let's head back to our storyboard, and we will now click on our last view controller here and give that a custom class, and we'll call that node view controller. This is the class we just created. And also we need to give this segue an identifier, and we will call this show single node. And with this done, what we need to do is configure this view controller in a similar way to what we have done with this view controller. So it needs actually a node, a selected node object, and also let's import CoreData. So this is what we are going to do. Here is a selected node property, which is going to be a node object. And what we are also going to need is an outlet for our text view. So let's go back to the storyboard, open the assistant editor, and simply drag as soon as I have the correct class here, and simply drag to the assistant editor, and this is going to be the content text view for the node content. And we, as you have already seen in the demonstration of this app, we have a text field here in the navigation bar. So we will add a text field property to our class here. So let's say var title text field, which is going to be UI text field. And we will now initialize that here in the view.load method. Let me just zoom in a little more. So title text field equals UI text field, and we'll give this a frame. Let's say cgrect make x0, y0, a width of about 200 pixels and a height of 22 should be sufficient. And let's also add a font, title text field.font. It should be bold, so let's say UI font.bold, system font size, let's say 19. We will give this a text alignment, so let's say title text field text alignment equals ns text alignment center. And now to add this to our navigation bar, we can use self.navigation item and replace the title view simply with our title text field. And that's it. And since we are already here, let's also give this two bar button items. The first one is going to be navigation item. Left bar button item is going to be UI bar button item. And actually we use the same one as we did in the last view controller. So UI bar button system item, which was stop. Target is self, and we will again call this dismiss VC. And also let's add navigation item, right bar button item, UI bar button item, UI bar button system item, and this time we're going to call it save. The target is self, and we will call it save node. So we will implement the save node function later. So let's begin with dismiss VC, which is pretty simple. It's going to be self.navigation controller pop view controller animated true, and let's just write the function header here, save node. And now let's go back to our node overview table view controller. Let me copy the storyboard segue identifier, and we go back here. And now we can go back to this prepare for segue with identifier method at the bottom of our file, and again check if segue.identifier is equal to show single node. What we want to do now is again create, as we did with the last view controller, a node view controller. Let node view controller, and this is going to be segue.destination view controller as node view controller. And that's it actually. And now there is a problem, because we want to perform this segue every time we press on an already created node, and we also want to perform this segue when we created a new node. So we have to differentiate between those two cases. So what we are going to do is creating a new property at the top of our file, which we are going to call, let's say, new node. New node. This is going to be a node object. It's going to be optional, so we can assign nil. And we will set it back to nil in view will appear. So let's say here new node equals nil. So every time we return back to this view controller, this is going to be nil. And as soon as we add a notebook, which is here, before we save, we can simply add our node that we have created here, our managed object, to new node, and can call now here our self.perform segue with identifier. This is show single node, sender is self. And now in our prepare for segue with identifier method here at the bottom of our file, simply check if our new node is nil. So let's say segue node equals new node. And now we can say, if this is the case, we can say node view controller, node VC, dot selected node is going to be the segue node. And if this is not the case, if there is no new node available, we can simply again create or get the node that we have to put in the selected node property from the array that we have created. So let's do it the same way we did it in the last view controller. So let's say if let index self table view index path for selected row, and let's add to our node VC selected node the nodes array and the index.row, and well, that's it actually. Let's remove those lines here. Now that we have set the selected node for our node view controller, we can work with these values, but first of all we need to create a managed object context here, which means that we can also copy some of the code from here, which is this one, what we have here in view will appear. So let's simply go ahead and copy that stuff. And this time we're going to place it in view.load, simply here beneath the super view.load call. And also let's create a MOC and as managed object context. And now we have a managed object context here. And what we also need to do now is, since we now have a selected node, we can check if there is a title included. So let's say if let node title equals selected node.title. So if there is one, we will simply say title text field dot text equals node title. And if not, so if this is a new node, then we can say title text field dot text insert title here. Let's do the same thing for the content of our node. So let's say node content equals selected node.content. So if there is content, we will set the how is it called? Content text view. So content text view.text is going to be the node content, and else the content text view.text is going to be empty. So that is that, and now we already have defined the dismiss VC function. Now let's also define the save node function, and all we need to do is actually using our selected node, call its title property and set it to the title text field dot text property, and that's it. And the same thing is going to happen with the selected node and its content, but this time it's going to be the content text view.text. And now we'll simply save our managed object context. Again, you could insert an arrow pointer here, and you could also decide if you want to dismiss the view controller once you have saved the node, or simply let the user tap on the X button, and that should complete our setup. So let's give it a test run, and I will also install it on a second device so that we can have a look at this in a second. So here we are pressing on the notebook one, and let's first of all try the X button, and it crashes the app. So let's have a quick look on what's going on there, which is the node overview. We have dismiss VC here. Let's go down a little. And there's dismiss VC with 2S instead of 1. So we'll simply try that again. So let's again press the NB1 button here. Let's press X and we come back. That works. Now we press the plus button and we come to our new view controller where we can insert a title. So let's insert a title here, time, and add some text here. I'm so excited. Save. No crash. Let's press X. And there is no node here. So we'll have to figure out what went wrong here. And I think I already know the problem. It is because we have not implemented the table view data source. So let's again implement this as we did it in the notebook overview and remove the number of sections warning and enter number of sections 1. And for the number of rows, we will use the nodes array and count it. And the last thing we need to do is configure the cell itself. We have used cell as a reuse identifier, and to configure the cell we will use its text label and its text, and we will simply use our nodes array, access it with the index path dot row, and what we want to get is the title again. And now let's run it one more time. So here we go. Let's bring up QuickTime, and I press NB1, and there's our first time node, and I press first time, and there is I am so excited what we just wrote into this node. So let's add another one. Let's say second node or something like that, or I'm at work, and the only thing that would, and so on. Let's save that too. And there's I'm at work, and that's it. Now, what is still left to check is whether iCloud really works. So let me run this on another device. So now our app is also running on my iPhone, and I'm now going back here to our notebook overview, and I will press plus on the iPhone, enter, let's say NB2, save the notebook, and now we have to wait until the iCloud syncs the data from one device to the other, and this can sometimes take a little while. So this is also one of the reasons why you have to check it with 3 devices. And while I was talking, here it is, there is notebook 2, and now as you can see here, this is my notebook 1. This is also on my other iPhone, and I will now add another node let's say tutorial Tuesday night, and I will simply add some more of this great text and save this one. And now again we will wait for this note to appear here on the iPod. So we have 2 notes at the moment, should be 3 in a second, or 2 or 3 or 4, and there it is. So there's Tuesday night, and once I open that note you can see what text with a lot of sense I have written on my iPhone. And so this is actually what we did so far. We have a app that syncs over different devices. We can change, let me also show you that we can change text here. So here's I am so excited. Let me say about this on my iPhone. I will sync. I will save it now, close it down, and let's give it some seconds before we reopen it. And let's see. It's not yet synced. Let's have a look again. Yeah, here it is. I'm so excited about this. You could, of course, improve the ways the sync works even further, and you can actually put a lot of effort into developing for iCloud. And I'd like to show you a great reference for taking a look at what is really possible with iCloud and what to account for when using this in a real-world example. So this is the iCloud for Developers page from Apple, and there is a great programming guide for CoreData. And as you can see here, is using the SQLite store with iCloud, and also using the iCloud debugging tools and troubleshooting best practices and so on. So when you're trying to develop this in or using iCloud in your own applications, and this was not enough for you, what you've already seen, then have a look at this. There's some great stuff in it. And also, when something went wrong and you have the feeling that everything you do just is kind of strange, then delete all of your iCloud content using the settings app here. Hit iCloud. I'm not signed in here at the moment, but you can you will find a button Manage Storage here, and then simply delete your app from your iCloud account and start over again, and this will help you eliminating some strange errors that sometimes occur. So I hope you had fun with this tutorial, and also I hope you're going to have fun with the Udemy course about the chat application, and well, have fun using this app and improve it even further. And as always, if you have questions, feel free to comment below.